Yeah, so I feel the situation in Wales is generally quite positive at the moment. At Bangor University, we now have 7 terminologists serving the needs of Welsh language terminology in education, and that's for both school and university level. And that's more than we've ever had before. And I believe that there are also now 2 terminologists working directly for the Welsh Government's translation service as well. And for instance, we've also had our dictionary app downloaded over 275,000 times. And one of the things that has certainly helped our work has been the Welsh Government's commitment to increase the number of Welsh speakers back up to 1 million speakers by 2050. So we're getting governmental support in this endeavour to increase the number of Welsh speakers. Whilst that hasn't yet translated directly into increased terminology funding, it has led to the funding of language technology infrastructure, which we hope will facilitate terminological research, such as automatic parallel term extraction for Welsh, for instance. So what about the challenges then? So you have the usual challenges, such as the sheer amount and breadth of new concepts constantly appearing in our ever-changing world. And closely related to that is the challenge of data collection, which I think Sue Ellen Wright covered a little bit. And that's important because we need to be able to quickly identify the required terms and find existing candidate terms that may already be being used. As Patrick mentioned earlier, it's important to avoid reinventing the wheel when standardizing terms. So it's crucial for us to know what's already out there. Whilst we've been making good progress on the technical side of processing the available data, the issues of data access and data rights, including copyright, licensing, and privacy issues, they remain challenging, to be honest, and sometimes I think they're more challenging than the technological aspects of the work. Certainly they're more outside of our direct control. And an additional challenge here is the fragmented nature of public funding in Wales, which means that the responsibility for terminology is divided and often not really recognised as such by the funding body. In practice, this makes coordination and standardization more complicated than it could be in a more centralized system. For instance, we've worked hard to form a good relationship with the main examination board in Wales, only for the qualifications body to decide to increase competition and try and spread the provision of qualification between multiple examination boards, many of which are actually based in England and have never really done anything with Welsh in the past. Another example of fragmentation is that Welsh language broadcasting is actually funded by the central UK government from London, whilst education and health, for instance, are funded by the devolved Welsh government down in Cardiff, and therefore they can operate quite independently. If we then move on to the terminology work itself, perhaps a familiar challenge is that of the general preference for acceptability of the term over technical conceptual precision. Writers and translators often prefer to use familiar vocabulary items in their documents, and this often results in a situation where many similar but distinct technical concepts end up sharing the same single Welsh term. For example, the English terms abolish, revoke, repeal, dissolve, and cancel tend to be corresponded by the same Welsh word, diddymu. However, the English terms can have different meanings within the legal system that is shared by England and Wales, and this can be a problem at higher levels of discourse, such as at university level during law degrees, for example. So here we have to turn to our subject specialists for their inputs, and we have produced law dictionaries, terminological dictionaries in the past. However, as Fidelma mentioned, we also have to consider the use of alternative forms for certain contexts or language registers, when what the specialists use may not be suitable for everyday use. And this can be especially important in fields such as healthcare, for instance, where people may not understand the terms on a patient form, patient-facing form, for example. So talking of subject specialists, we feel that an important consideration when developing terminology is to encourage subject domain discourse in the language. In our case, it has meant encouraging discourse among specialists, such as Welsh-speaking lecturers working at our universities. A good example of this would be the Welsh medium academic journal Gwerddon. Having tried the committee approach to term standardisation in the past, we're now actually trying to avoid coining terms by committee. We'd really rather see them arise naturally in context in the writing of us or speech of people who are familiar with the underlying concepts, with our terminologists on hand to help if required. If I then move on to linguistic issues, I'd have to say that something like 80% of the problems that we face stem from the idiosyncrasies of English, things like phrasal verbs, the fluidity of word classes where an adjective or a verb can suddenly become a noun, a circular, for instance, for a letter. Another problem is that of headless English terms, things like microwave, for when people refer to a microwave oven, where the head of the term has been lost and the modifier or specifier is used. These sometimes cause problems for us, especially because we have agreements between number and a noun in Welsh modifiers. So something like microdon for microwave wouldn't really be correct from a linguistic point of view. An additional recurring problem for us is the challenge of mapping some English sounds to Welsh orthography. And this can be challenging because we're using those English sounds in our code switching as well within more kind of spoken Welsh. So this is a real problem that we're facing now, that we're creating automatic speech recognition systems for Welsh. We actually have to decide how we want to realize these spoken forms, these mishmashes of Welsh and English on screen. One example of a problem that we've had is that the sound of ch is a little bit problematic in Welsh. So we're currently having issues with settling on a term for coach, as in someone who coaches. That doesn't look or sound like a naive Welsh speaker's best approximation of the English. Something like coach would just sound strange to most Welsh speakers. And as the idiosyncrasies of English affect a lot of languages these days, I'd really like to see them addressed more openly on this kind of stage. It'd be nice to be able to share some of the strategies that we've developed for dealing with them, for example, because they affect so many languages. This morning, Jessica referred to the phenomenon of terminology everywhere. And I think that's another challenge for us, which is especially relevant in the case of minoritized languages, because where exactly do we draw the line between standardizing technical terms and filling lexical gaps in the general language? Currently, terminologists in Wales have a clearly defined subject area, such as the education curriculum. Yet amongst the general population and within the scope of language planners as well, there seems to be a perception that we exist to coin new words, whatever that new word needs to be. And we need to ask ourselves, really, should we lean into that role or try and keep to our existing more LSP style function? So that's a very quick overview of the challenges facing the situation in Wales. I believe that the way forward for us will probably be a coordinated consensus-based approach, bringing together the relevant stakeholders, and there are a lot of encouraging developments there. We've got a new committee to look again at our orthographical system starting up and meeting again soon. But these processes take time, and in the meantime, the pile of terms in need of standardization continues to grow. Thank you.